back into the episode of Tactical Enlightenment. Our YouTube channel is dedicated to all things Bannerlord related and especially advanced battlefield command and tactics. And today we're going to be talking about infantry. In fact, my favorite infantry in all of Bannerlord. We're going to be running a series of tests here. We're going to be talking about stats. We're going to do a little bit of tactics, and then I'm going to come up with my conclusion. Now, everybody already knows that my favorite infantry in all of Bannerlord is the Battalion Wildling. In this episode, though, we're going to be comparing all of the normal spear and shield infantry from the different kingdoms, the Oath Sworn and whatnot. A lot of people love the Legionnaire, and I'm going to essentially show you, I think, through testing, why I think after the Battalion Wildling, who has the incredible javelins, the best infantryman in all the game, in other words, my second favorite infantryman in the entire game, is not the Legionary, but it's the Aserai veteran infantry, right? The reason is not statistics necessarily, but a combination of statistics. Now, interestingly enough, I've been showing you all this infantry, and they almost all have 130 one-handed skill, which is their primary attacking skill, and 130 athleticism, including the Legionary, very similar, right? But look at the Aserai veteran infantry, right? I knew they were stronger, but 160 one-handed. That's very interesting. Now, their throwing skill's not great, but the traditional 130 athletics, and they have a spear and the ability to throw javelins. Now, through all these tests, we're going to do very simple stuff here. Nice open field tactics without the captains having to do anything with the tests at all. We're going to talk about different formations, and then we will get a little bit more exotic and have challenges against everything from shock troops to cavalry, and we'll even do sharpshooters in here, right? We will do an episode, or at least one of these quick battles against archers. Now, you notice what I'm doing here, right? We're just going to speed things up with the RTS mode. This way, this doesn't take 30 minutes. This still may take 20 minutes because I want to show you sort of definitively why I like these guys. But I also want to talk about some of the basics that have to do with infantry, right? Formations. You don't want a compacted formation like that for infantry, right? Unless they're playing defensive, you want them spread out. And I'll talk more about that in a second. The Dark Hand force here is closing in on them. And get my captain out of the way here. Now, there's multiple options for you as the commander. They could just stand still. You see them firing their javelins, by the way. The other thing you can do is you can manually move them, right? And that's a lot of micromanagement for most people, more than they're willing to do. You hear the javelins hitting the shields left and right. Of course, you can charge with them. F1, F3, that's probably most people's favorite way. Now, with javelin throwers, just like archers, you can use the engage command, which is F1, F4, and then they will attempt to kite, right? They will attempt to do what I'm doing right now. The AI will do a pretty good job of it. I'll show you why it's still ultimately not a great strategy. Now, I'm going to slow this down because I want to show you something if you just charge, right? So I tell these guys to charge, and look what happens here at the ends of the formations. These guys throw javelins, and look at them fucking stand there like they're entranced with a sleeping spell. Unfortunately, if they have ammo left and you tell them to charge, these guys will just stand there until they have line of sight. I don't think that's optimal. Now, they're still going to win. I've already run some of these tests, and I'm confident about this. Obviously, we weakened the Khazate here considerably by throwing javelins at him. Now our two sides of the formations kind of crimp in on him, and there's going to be a huge flush of green as the Khazates get carved apart here. In fact, that was rather dramatic. 134 survivors, right? So 2/3 of our veteran infantrymen survived this initial example. That actually surprises even me. So again, we're going to be running the exact same thing over and over again. Hopefully I don't have to tell you guys that in between these battles. I may put a little different terrain in here, but I don't really want the terrain affecting things too much. Now, early on in this episode, we're not going to be fiddling a whole lot with tactics, just the minutia, the small components of combat. And I want to talk about the distance of your line. I don't think you want it to be tight because a lot of those javelin throwers can't throw. In my opinion, you want it about twice the size of the enemy line. And the main reason for that is that those guys at the end can still throw javelins. They can still hit the enemy. They're still within range. And even better yet, they're going to get flanking fire on them, right? They're going to be throwing their javelins at kind of an angle here. And we will watch, by the way, the engage process here. This is just what happens when you engage. When you use F1, F4, you see the AI is now dutifully moving these guys back. And while they're backpedaling, they're throwing javelins. very effective, although it has a limitation, and I'll show you that in a second. But let me finish this point here real quick. We'll speed this up and I'll show you the weakness. As these guys continue to engage, one of the problems is when they run out of ammo, unfortunately, the AI is not smart enough for these guys to charge. So even though most of these guys are out of ammo, they continue to sort of backpedal and fight like this. This is suboptimal, as those guys on the end are not fighting, and retreating enemies, or retreating troops rather, do less damage than advancing enemies, right? It has to do with the physics system that the game has, right? So you can see we're now losing this battle where we just butchered the Khazate, right? So we won't waste too much of your time in between these examples. But engage basically works with a caveat. If you're going to use engage, what you want to be able to do is micromanage, and after about 20 or 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds at most of engaging, you want to tell them to charge, right? Now here's the other thing, a little caveat. If you are manually controlling these guys, if you're moving them around like this, and I'm just going to have these guys backpedal, and by the way, let's watch this up close. Look at them. Look at their angle. They're throwing javelins almost to the flank of the enemy because they're over there on the side. That's one of the reasons, one of the two reasons I think you want this kind of a line formation that is twice the length of the enemy's line. Also notice you can't see their ammo, even though these guys are clearly throwing javelins. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's the custom battle or what, but it's not showing their ammo. Now what we're going to do here is charge and hold fire, right? Very different from the first example, because we don't want anybody standing there just holding a javelin. Every single guy is looking for a skull to cleave. And of course, the two different sides now, again, just like the first battle, are crimping in on the enemy. That is the other reason you want a nice wide line like that, so that even if the center starts to break down, your two flanking ends, with very little micromanagement, butcher the enemy. And indeed, an even better result using that, right? So a little bit of kiting, a little bit of engaging. If you're busy, you can just do the F1, F4, but make sure they charge and hold fire if you want the best possible results. All right, so back with the custom battle menu here again, and we're going to try different kingdoms infantry. I know some of this is going to be repetitive. This is necessary for me to sort of make the definitive statement that this is one of the best infantrymen in the game. Now, incidentally, my upcoming Aserai campaign is why I started studying these units, right? To quote, what's his name from Last Samurai, right? I want to know my enemy. And of course, before you know your enemy, you must know your own strengths, right? I'm trying to find out what units of the Aserai are really powerful and why, right? What's the right way to use them? Kazimoto is who I was thinking, right? Kazimoto, the actor who played the Ben Watanabe or whatever, who played the amazing samurai leader in Last Samurai. So in these examples here, we're not going to do too much special, right? What we're going to do though is throw javelins and then charge and just pit them against the various other kingdoms tier 5 infantry of various kinds. You can see here against the Sturgian Heavy Axemen, and the Sturgian Heavy Axemen are good units, a complete rout, right? An incredible destructive victory for them. That one even surprises me, right? I don't know if that's because the Sturgian Heavy Axemen were pulling out their axes there. I was actually in the back of my brain trying to think of his name. It's actually, I think it's Ken Watanabe or Watanabe or something like that. I apologize if you like know the guy or if he's your favorite actor. Anyways, he was the samurai leader. Yeah, anyways, we'll leave that point alone here. You're not here for fucking movie history. All right, so now we're going to try the Sturgian Heavy Spearmen, which are units that I really like, but I've never really done testing with them to sort of determine whether or not they are actually good, right? And of course, these are not definitive. Battles are always different. They have strengths and weaknesses, but these are fairly definitive, at least as far as infantry clashes, right? This is the infantry clash of the heavy Aserai and heavy Sturgian forces smashing into each other. Now, again, you saw my line was a little bit bigger than the enemy's line, so that'll allow our guys to creep around the ends here and start to flank, and I think that's one of the keys to infantry battles, right? The other one, of course, is javelins are always nice because you're breaking shields, you're injuring guys before they even get to you, and again, another astonishing, crushing rout. And I promise you, friends, I'm not using any kind of cheat codes or any kind of, I don't know what people would think I would use, right? I have no reason to be biased towards one of these units. I'm just trying to show you how devastating effective these guys are. Now, not only do they have javelins, but we already saw they have the highest weapon skill of any of the infantry. which is, and it's interesting. It's not like it's 10 higher. A lot of times if a unit has a superior stat, it's 10 higher. It's 30 higher for their one-handed skill, which is a lot. That's quite a difference. So very similar athleticism. They really don't seem to have a major weakness. Now their throwing skill ironically is low, but I think they get either 4 or 5 javelins, and that clearly makes up for it. Now I still think in a battle where I was playing both sides, so to speak, they would get crushed by the wildlings here. In this case, of course, the AI doesn't know how to use the wildlings. It's just charging in like their shock troops, and so they really didn't unleash a hail of javelins. Maybe I got to charge or something, or I've got to set them as the defenders or something to get a real result. But look at this destruction, right? Absolutely shredded the wildlings. And again, this is 200 on 200 with no mods or anything like that. This is vanilla Bannerlord, and I am stunned by these results. Even basically, the veteran Aserai infantry is the best overall infantryman in the game. Now, if you use tactics, if you're really good at kiting, surrounding, flanking, I think the wildling is actually far superior because they have 10 javelins and 30 throwing skill. To me, that's dramatically more important than in this case, the one-handed skill. But nevertheless, for a lot of players who are not kiting, I don't think this evidence is anything other than dramatic, right? Just firing again. This is the Vlandian sergeants. Now we're just going to take a world tour here of Calradia. Again on the ends. If you don't tell them to charge, or rather, if you don't tell them to hold fire, they will stand there. And I think that's suboptimal. The sergeants now are spreading to the end instead of being crimped in on by the ends. Again, to reemphasize that point, it's a lot of micromanagement. But if you're in this battle, and you've got to win, I really think you want to be attacking with your infantry, especially your shock troops that have those little pathetic throwing axes, and tell them to hold fire. Now, incidentally, you can do that before the battle starts with your shock troops. Almost no shock troops has a reasonably good weapon, unless it's shock troop against shock troop, right? And then you actually want them throwing their throwing axes because the other shock troops can't do anything about it, right? They don't have a shield. But in traditional infantry battles, I would have your shock troops, be it the palace guards or whatever, hold fire early on, right? You want them using their fucking giant two-handed massacring weapon, not their little pitiful throwing axe. Again, you can see the size of the line here, and the Vlandians coming in a shield wall because they're getting pounded by javelins. So again, we charge, we hold fire, and look what happens again at the end. They get surrounded, they get flanked, and they get enveloped. Now, the sergeants are actually doing better than any of the kingdoms so far. Don't worry, you fans of the legionary, you will get your licks. But ultimately, again, these guys remain superior. They are undefeated in this challenge. They've just eaten everything alive, and it hasn't, frankly, been that close. Now we'll run a few variations here, a few very subtle different variations. And I will be playing around a little bit more with flanking and squares and stuff like that as part of this episode. Some of the more extreme micromanagement you can do, but I don't think it's actually that necessary, right? Would you say at this stage these guys need to do anything except hold fire and attack? I don't think so, right? Unless you have a ton of time and you can afford to do the manual kiting and stuff like this. I think the results they've already obtained, right, 100 survivors against the very tough sergeants is certainly better than, well, it's going to win you the majority of battles, right? In other words, they have almost a 2-to-1 KDR against supposedly equal troops. And again, zooming into the ends here, when you have them spread out like that, so much more effective, right? On top of that, of course, every single one of these guys on the flank just envelops the enemy. I have seen videos from like Strat Game Guide where he suggests like a circle formation and then an F1, F3 charge. I'm not going to delve that far into the minutia. There's 10,000 different options, right? You could have them engaging in a skein and engaging in a circle where the circle's running around and stuff like that. Incidentally, I did run a circle test with them, and it was really interesting. I ran it against the legionaries and the Aserai veteran infantry in a medium-sized circle. The legionnaires wouldn't charge. They just stood there holding their shields up for whatever reason. It was almost like I broke the coding in the game. Even though I was the defender, for like 5 minutes, the legionaries just stood there, and then eventually they started making their way in. It was almost like it spooked the AI. And I was wondering, actually, in a circle, if these guys, if you charge them, aren't you going to get flanked and javelins in the side? Now, we'll try a tighter division here. We already know this is, or at least I already know this is going to be less effective. But just include this test as part of this episode. That way it's sort of definitive, at least infantry on infantry. Now, this is what happens if you don't do anything, right? If you just stand here, unfortunately, what happens is your guys get outnumbered on the front line there, and they will have difficulty. The death spam is not good. You tell these guys to charge without hold fire, and like half of their guys are not part of this battle. Now, they're strong enough to make up for it once the enemy gets to them. I think this will still be a close fight, but clearly you want to be actively telling these guys to charge and preferably holding fire. I think I've made that point by now that the best possible thing for these guys to be doing is charging and holding fire, preferably after they throw a couple of javelin barrages. Again, you see them still successful here, even though we used sort of what I would consider the least optimal way of using these guys. So what else can we do here? We're going to try some more tests. I'm definitely going to break our units into different formations, and we will try a little flanking fire. But that's also hardly necessary with the success we've had so far. Almost every single one of these challenges, they've had 100 troops or more. A few of them, they had like 80 survivors. Of course, the one that totally failed was just engage, perma-engage. They just ran and ran and ran, and it was no effect. Now, here's a reason not to have them in a super long line. Not only, of course, is the center going to get blown up, but none of these guys down here are doing shit. They're just holding their javelins. The effective range of javelins is like 80 to 100 feet, just sort of an estimate. Once they get close, they will start throwing their javelins, but it's too late, right? Now the sergeants have punched a hole in the middle. The vanguard of the sergeants arrives, whatever the vanguard is of the same unit. It's kind of bad AI. And our two ends are kind of getting swallowed up. Now, they're still winning. This is another good example of where it's subpar tactics. And because of that weapon skill, they're still going to beat the sergeants here. I just kind of find this astonishing. Out of all of this series, right, of the best difference series, this to me is by far one of the most blatantly sort of hidden. I would say it's hidden. Most people know that they have this higher weapon skill, but I don't think, and maybe I'm the one who's ignorant. Maybe you guys are like, oh, I knew this already, dude. You don't know shit. Fucking tactical duncery. You don't know shit. I'm assuming that quite a few of the guys that are watching this have either relatively limited experience, never played the Aserai, or have never delved into the deep weeds of the game. Starting up this Aserai campaign and wanting to give you guys a high quality run through of a campaign, I wanted to know my guys a little bit closer, and so I am getting a little deeper into the weeds on the units. Of course, this is obviously beneficial for anybody who's either fighting against the Aserai, or even if you're like the Southern Empire force here, and we'll see what happens if we kite a little late. Those guys are doing a decent job, actually, of just kind of fighting while they backpedal. These guys, however, can't throw their javelins because of the angle. But I wanted to know, right, like which units of the Aserai are a little above average, which are a little below average. There really aren't any units in the game that are absolute trash or absolutely dominant, except perhaps maybe the Khans Guards and the Fian Champs. All the rest of the units have advantages, but this is pretty close to a dominant advantage, right? Every single test so far, except the one where we falsely did the engage process, this Aserai veteran infantry is just shredding everything in sight. All right, another couple examples here against the sergeant. And what we're going to eventually start to do here is do more advanced tactics, right? Can we obtain a higher kill rate than we've had about a 3-to-1 so far. 137 survivors was the highest so far, and that was where we did a lot of micromanagement. This is extreme micromanagement. Of course, you would probably only do this if you had an mostly infantry army, which is not real common. You might have an army that's 70%, 80% infantry at most in the early game. Obviously, we have 100% infantry here. Now, this is a very basic strategy. It's the kind of stuff, oh shit, apologies for that little snafu. With moving multiple units, sometimes, of course, you get confused at which units you're moving. This is very similar to how I played with the Battanian wildlings, right? You break them into 3, maybe 4 divisions, surround the enemy, use the primary division in the center as a defensive square or a defensive shield wall. You can even kite with them, and then wrap your other divisions behind the enemy, right? It's a very similar concept. Everything is the same here to the kill box. The line is going to collide. That's kind of interesting. They're just like two trains kind of glancing off each other there. But all of this is the same thing that you would do if you had lots of archers and lots of skirmishers, right? You would surround the enemy, fishball them in the middle, and then do some micromanagement so that they can't really reach your units until they're heavily softened, right? Right now they're getting javelins at all points. Basically, this unit is having javelins thrown in their back, right? These guys are taking the proverbial stick up the ass here. Now, not as easy to do this with the Aserai veteran infantry. In fact, we'll just charge here since we're probably out of ammo because of that, right? These guys run out of ammo faster than the wildlings. And in fact, that original line, optimally, I probably should have squared, right? They got annihilated, and these other two divisions are going to have to clean up for the rest of this battle. I think they'll still win. Yeah, it looks quite positive on the death spam. And again, the emphasis on that 130 or 160 weapon skill is just fucking a powerful, it's a powerful process. Yeah, it's a powerful effect for this unit. Now I'll pre-select these guys. We'll pre-split these, just a little bit more refinement. But I'm not sure we're going to be able to beat just the simple line formation where we microed, right? And what we did with, just to refresh your memory in case you missed it, I know there's been like 10 of these battles in a row, and I don't have all the fancy spreadsheets of like a Strat Gaming Guide or Spartacus or whatever these other YouTube channelers. They've got all kinds of video editing experience. All I've got here is lots of profanity, a little historical background, and tests like this for you fellas. Well, that and a desire to improve, right? I'm one of those guys, perfectionist, constantly driven to get better at stuff, which means maybe in a couple of years we'll have video editing on the channel. We shall see. But speaking of perfectionism, right, we are closing in these divisions earlier on here. And I think in a perfect world, you would square a division and just feed it to the enemy. Basically say, attack these boys. Unfortunately, here the AI is actually making them attack. And that's a little bit of an error processing that's related to the RTS mod. That's not something I actually want here, but we'll see if we can make this work here. Don't worry, for those who want to see tests against cavalry and archers, that's coming up. Of course, I will try to leave timestamps. I'm getting slowly better at that, but again, technologically not super advanced. Now notice what happened here too. This little tiny vanguard that the enemy has sucked up one of my divisions, right? Instead of attacking the main group, those guys on charge got distracted by those like 20 sergeants, and the main division here is getting mauled. Because these other two divisions were kind of late to the party. That is, I would definitely consider suboptimal. Now we're throwing javelins here, but the sergeants are eating that square, and now we'll just have these divisions charged to finish this. Clearly, this micromanaging was a lot of effort and not a lot of benefit. I mean, still a victory, but I would say that was definitely not worth it. All right, so a few more tests here before we get on to the cavalry, and we will try sharpshooters as well. Actually, you know what we need to do is cons guards. Not cons guards, but we'll do the tier 5 to make it fair. And I think you guys already know the results of horse archers against archers, but we will still do that just for those who really want to see. And there's not much tactics you can use from that. But one more test here just to see how nasty these guys can be used when they're used correctly. So in this attempt, what we'll try to do, of course, besides unloading a ton of javelins on them, is we will form a square with our center division here, right? In fact, in perfect situation here, you can get a really small square to attract the enemy center, and then all of these other guys here firing away. The other thing I think I'll do here is, as opposed to the previous example, is we will have that square move away, right? And what that does, of course, is all of those guys chasing the sergeants are throwing javelins into the back of the enemy. Now, it's possible the sergeants split. Every once in a while, you'll see an infantry division for the AI split, but I don't think that's going to be the case here. In fact, they're pretty much zerging towards the center, and they've started to put their shields up, which is going to make them move even slower. Now we'll move in our two different flanks here. This is the 2nd and 6th division. None of that really matters. In fact, I'm not sure why I'm telling you numbers. And we'll do a tiny bit of sort of what I would consider more precise kiting here. Had some UI errors the previous attempt. We'll see if we can't do it a little bit better. Now, distance is optimal. If you're going to be doing this, if you're going to be extending all this labor to do this kind of advanced kiting / kill boxing, and they are splitting, how interesting. So 1, 2, 3 different divisions. They're splitting. You know what we will do? We'll simply kite these guys and now attack them. Once they're kited, there's going to be like spread out 30 infantry, and we'll keep moving this square back. These 2 different wings are going to absolutely eviscerate their attackers. And it shows one of the dangers. Even if you split against a proper kill box, it still is not going to save you, right? The square is absorbing a huge amount of attention. The 2 different wings are going to absolutely crush and rout the Vlandians in the center. In fact, I already see routers. The square, the enemy kind of abandoned it, so we might as well get those guys in there as well. And the enemy, honestly, to quote Tony G, the poker player, Tony Guoga, the enemy played this as bad as they can, right? Their career is finished. They are, in this episode, they are definitely gone. They are swallowed up here. There's almost no death for our side, and we have a total massacre. In fact, out of all of the different Sergeant battles so far, that was definitely the best. 147 survivors. So worth it to do all that? Probably not, but it is more effective than just standard straight line engage and then charge once they're low on ammo. I know some of you guys, of course, want to see some of the other challenges, so let's do a Vlandian champion, right? This is going to be 200 tier 5 cavalry, and I think you guys already know the answer. The game is supposed to be somewhat rock, paper, scissors, where cavalry beat archers and archers beat infantry and infantry beat cavalry, but unfortunately that's not typically how this works. In this game, cavalry suck, and this sad attempt here by the Vlandian champions, I'll be surprised if they kill half this force. Of course, the infantry is supposed to win probably spear infantry against cavalry anyways, or at least in a rock, paper, scissors format. And you could see they're doing precisely that, right? The champions are scoring a kill or two, but man, as soon as they turn their back, they charge through, they get javelins up the ass. And there's probably a lot of different guys that are just holding their shield up and then cutting these guys down once the horsemen are slowed down. This is actually a lot worse than I expected the champions to do, but that's because heavy cavalry, as we've talked about on the channel, heavy cavalry without ammunition, in other words without javelins, suck. So let's try the sharpshooter, right? This should be really hard. I imagine the enemy's going to kite like a motherfucker. This might take quite a while. We shall see. We shall see what happens here. Now, of course, we're not going to shield wall. One of the fatal things that the enemy AI does in this situation against archers, and hopefully you're not doing it, is if you have mostly infantry, don't shield wall unless they're strictly there to survive. If you're having them trying to attack the enemy, you want them to be in line formation. You hear that sound? That's their shields being hit. Now, they're not in a shield wall, but these guys aren't dumb. They're not going to carry a 30-pound shield just to drag it on the ground. They're using it. The enemy's shooting bolts at them, and there's very few kills for the enemy, right? The enemy's scoring an occasional kill here. That's because every single one of those guys is doing a pretty good job of blocking these bolts. Now, the reason you don't want to be in a shield wall is because you have to chase these guys down. Look how fast they're kiting. In fact, even on the fastest movement formation here, line formation, they're still effectively kiting us here. Now, this sharpshooter division is probably on the AI equivalent of engage, right? You don't get to see what the enemy orders are, I think, to their forces. Maybe there's some way with a mod or something, or maybe you can hear the commander. But in this case, they are kiting to the edge of the map. Well, guess what's going to happen? When they reach the edge of the map, right, they're going to get destroyed. We're going to be able to start throwing javelins into them. We're going to be able to come to grips with them in melee. In this example, I mean, we shall see. Maybe they'll really shoot the edges, but this example will sort of complete the trifecta. They're smoking all of the infantry. I'm not even going to do shock troops because, of course, shock troops versus javelins is an absolute massacre. The wildlings would be able to do that with like 2 losses. They're doing actually a better job kiting than I expected the AI to be able to do. I thought I was going to be able to press them against the wall here. So this is taking just a hair longer than I thought. But I would say we've suffered 10 or 15 losses at most. And the enemy really is sort of scrambled and scattering like little bitches. Now we can have these guys charge. I'm sure they're throwing javelins. In fact, that's what the death spam is, right? The sharpshooters are getting hit by javelins because these guys can run and throw javelins, right? You can't shoot an arrow, I mean, unless you're on a horse while you're moving. But these infantry can sure throw their javelins. And now that they've reached the sharpshooters, of course, their superior weapon skills, it's no contest, right? So this is This is really impressive to me. This veteran Aserai infantry has destroyed everything. Legionaries, wildlings, shock troops, cavalry, sharpshooters. Just bring it on, right? It's been a complete massacre. And just because we can here, we will go ahead and show you the Volgiers, right? This is a no chance kind of thing, especially if we kite, right? Even if we don't kite, they're going to take 1,000 javelins to the face here. Javelins thrown at short distance typically do to a good hit. They typically do between 1/3 and 2/3 of your health in one shot, and a lot of times, of course, a headshot is fatal. Now we'll just do some very simple tactics here. We will stretch the 1st and 5th to opposite sides here as the enemy comes in. My line is kind of long here. We'll see what happens. This way we can discharge a lot of our javelins. Of course, this mass of troops, doesn't matter what formation they're in, it's all going to get massacred by javelins because, of course, they have no shields. They have absolutely no protection. This is probably not a fair example because the enemy will never attack you with all shock troops. In fact, that reminds me, I had a guy say, hey, would you do an all shock through playthrough? No thanks. There's absolutely no tactics apart from flanking and stuff like that. You have no ability to use a unit in defense or to survive, like against horse archers, all shock troops. I mean, I might as well grate my head with a cheese grater. No thanks, fellas. Sorry. Sometimes people just give me requests where it takes me 5 seconds to think about, and I'm like, yeah, I'll let you do that one. Why don't you guys feel free to post some videos on YouTube when you do an all shock troop episode. I mean, I guess if you were doing like keep defense, it would work, right? You just fought within the courtyard. But if we're talking like playing a whole campaign, I'd rather grate my head with a fucking cheese grater. All right, so let's completely dispatch this Volgier here. We will do a square. We will do some enveloping processes. Now, once they get a hold of our units, they're going to be able to do massive damage, right? That's the one place, of course, that shock troops are designed to do well, is against units in hand-to-hand. Most tests where you run shock troops against other infantry, they do really well. A lot of times they do smashingly well. I've even smashed like the legionary with the... these guys are actually getting caught up here. I've kind of fumbled my control here. Might as well just have these guys charge. And there's actually way more death spam than I expected to suffer. I kind of look like an egg on my face. You might be better in this type of battle, simply doing engage and then charge once they're out of ammo, right? Because of course you're going to immolate them with javelins. But as you can see here, it just doesn't matter, right? Still a destructive victory for them. So let's do one last example here, just because I know some guys out there want to see it. This is not really a thing either. In fact, I'm planning on a javelin campaign, and the way I'm planning on going about it is kind of interesting. It's kind of evolving in my head. I think it's going to be a side branch of my Aserai campaign. That way I have a lot of the similar units and names and levels and whatnot. And what we'll simply do is I will break off into a separate campaign, and we will do javelins only. Now, I'm not planning on doing javelins with no cavalry. I'm still going to use cavalry, just cavalry that have javelins. Now, this is your only option, right? This is why I refuse to do strictly infantry against horse archers. I just don't want to sit in the middle of the battlefield and get 90,000 arrows shot at me before they decide to engage. Now, you might be able to press up against the corner of the map and kind of trap some of their units, but I really don't want to involve... Whoops, sorry about that. Where do we go here? Sometimes I got the settings too quick to move around. I really don't want to just sit here in the middle of a square squatting while 80,000 arrows are expended on us. This is a no-win situation. Unless you have other units, you're just never going to win this, right? This is almost precisely how, of course, they were fighting cavalry too. Look at, they're getting themselves caught up a little bit. Well, this is one way we can win, is if the AI kind of acts like dipshits, but they're keeping most of their forces out and just shooting. We can charge here and do some shield walls, but I don't think it's going to matter. I'm just not willing to do this. This is a no-win situation. Even though we're actually scoring more kills, it's because the AI is doing stupid shit here. We're still going to lose. And so this is the one weakness, right, of the asset. If you can call this a weakness, right? You should never have the veteran infantry on their own anyways, but obviously horse archers destroy infantry. All right, we're going to wrap this episode up. What's the bottom line here? I think you guys get it, right? I'm beating a dead horse. Clearly, the Aserai veteran infantry is one of the best units in the game. Of course, if you want to see more, you want to subscribe, I appreciate you fellas, and I will see you guys next time.